Act 13, 2012, we'll talk a little bit about the structure, the funding, which is probably the most interesting part for many municipalities, and also the implication of zoning ordinance. PSAB has taken a position of both pros and cons on Act 13. We know from municipal governments that the funding aspect or lack of funding from gas drilling for a lot of communities has been a major issue. We are concerned about the implications of the zoning impact of Act 13 upon our local governments. And that's a key issue that we're going to have to look at not only today but over the next several weeks. The story begins. Well, a couple of 100 million years ago, we had plants in this area. They lived, they died, and they got buried by the sediment, and we ended up with a shale rock. And inside that shale rock is natural gas as a result of the decomposition of those plants. And for many years, we knew it was there. We knew it's been there for the last 100 years in the shale gas. It's been drilled back going into the 1920s. In the 1970s, in Texas, they were able to develop what they call horizontal drilling. Typically, the drilling was vertical, and using that method allowed you to get a very limited amount of gas out of the well. You could get oil out of it, because it was under pressure. Gas was harder to get because it would be small pockets. And we've had gas drilling for years. In western part of the state, Indiana County, Armstrong, Jefferson, down in Washington, and those areas of the state, we've had natural gas drilling down here for many, many decades. In fact, in the 1970s, Indiana County was considered a gas drilling capital of the United States for all the gas wells that were being drilled in Indiana County. They were shallow wells compared to what we're dealing with today. They also were vertical wells. They were not horizontal. We moved on into 2007, and Range Resources started drilling horizontal wells in Pennsylvania. I think the first well was out in the western part of the state outside of Washington County, if I recall correctly. They were able to capture the idea of the horizontal drilling, and not just to take the well down and make it bend slightly as they made the transition into the shale beds, but they were able to directionally push that well bit. And they were able to go down 10,000 feet and out another 2,000 or 3,000 feet horizontally. Huge difference in the amount of gas that they were able to extract from the rock at that point in time. The shale rock is a tight formation, so they have to frack it. And that brings in a whole different issue. We've all heard of fracking. We probably understand a little bit of what it does and how it works. I'm not going to go into that part of it. But suffice to say, that has been one of the major issues. For every well that's drilled, it takes 3 to 4 million gallons of water to produce that well. And just to think of a local issue, we know we've all dealt with roads and bridges, but each gallon of water weighs 8.35 pounds. So round it off to 8 pounds a gallon. And if you're moving 3 million gallons of water in to drill one well, you're talking 25 million pounds of water being hauled in to handle that well. And it's got to be disposed of. It's got to come from someplace. So the issue that Range Resources and others have had to deal with is the fracking. Not only the water issue, but also sand and pipe. Sand comes from not Pennsylvania. It's a specialized sand that's used for the fracking purposes. It has a very round surface to it. Our sand that we have in Pennsylvania and other places tends to be more, has more angles and edges to it, so it doesn't allow the material to flow as nicely. So you get the sand, I think it comes out of, if I want to remember right, somewhere Colorado and Nebraska, I forget exactly. But Wisconsin, I know that it's all hauled in on rail cars. So there's another issue we deal with locally. We move into the last several years, we've been fighting for money for local governments. We've been dealing with the road issues, posting and bonding, water issues, housing and related issues. Ray will talk a little bit more about some of those impacts that his county has resulted in. Governor Corbett appointed the Marcellus Advisory Commission. They did their study, came back with pages, 70-some pages of recommendations, and the advisory council or advisory committee has been analyzed and the governor accepted. We move on. Okay, there we go. We end up with a couple bills introduced, Senate Bill 1100, House Bill 1950, which results in Act 13. Act 13 came about last year. between the members of both the House and the Senate and representative governor's offices. I kind of referred to as the smartest guys in the room. You might remember the old story about Enron and how they always referred to other people as being the smartest guys in the room, and they ended up costing a lot of money. Well, I'm hoping, we're all hoping that Act 13 proves that the smartest guys in the room actually were there, and Act 13 is going to be a positive. There are some doubts, no doubts about it. What we didn't know when Act 13 was implemented or designed, whatever you want to call it, for that construction of it. If more than one person knows something, it's not a secret any longer. And by this, I'm referring to the aspects of natural gas drilling itself. We know that it was developed in the 1970s, the horizontal drilling. We know there's a number of companies that do it already. Not only in Pennsylvania, but in Ohio, West Virginia. We know they're doing the same in Texas and Wyoming and other states. Well, it's not just in the United States. It's also in Canada. It's also in Central Europe. It's also in South America. So the secrets that we have to extract that natural gas is not a secret. It's out there. Everybody's using it. We have plate tectonics. Well, I'm sure you never thought you'd hear of plate tectonics used in the discussion of natural gas. But the fact that the same grounds, the geological formations that we're drilling into, are available in other countries, other continents. And so that gas that we think that we have a somewhat proprietary nature to here in Pennsylvania or even in the United States is not limited to just us. So there are other markets out there worldwide that have the same geological formations and are going to start making use of that same natural gas. I'm concerned that we have the tulip bulb factor. Tulip bulbs, if you might remember your history, back in the 1700s, there was a big rush on tulip bulbs. They thought it was the greatest investment they could make. Well, I'm kind of concerned for our communities, and we represent 958 boroughs in Pennsylvania, and there's another 1,400 townships out there, that we might be in a tulip bulb issue, where we're all thinking it's going to make us rich, and we're all going to be spending the money, and some people are going to get rich, and some people are not going to get rich. So I don't know where we're going to be. I just actually should have said 2012, but we're now in 2012. Are we in a tulip bulb vacuum, so to speak? We have, under Act 13, there will be a distribution of income. There is fees, or are fees that are being collected from the drillers now. We do know that under the Act 13 formula, when gas prices, and this is a number they're using this year, is $3 to $4.99 for natural gas, we'll be getting $50,000 per well. This is for the first year. We also know that in 2011 we'll be looking at prices probably in the $2.66 to $2.99 price per natural gas. Today, on today's market right now, the price of natural gas per a million British thermal units, I believe, is $2.07. It's just about the lowest it has been in almost 15 years. It did reach a lower number last week at about $1.98. If you were to look at the different market prices across the country, we've seen prices down in the 180s and even lower than that. We are concerned that in 2012, we'll be looking at payments available to municipal governments starting at about $35,000 per well. They run through 15 years, and at the rate we're going right now, in 15 years, the amount of money per well will be about $5,000 per well. Now, Bradford County, and I know Ray will talk about that, will have a huge impact or release a substantial amount of money that come into their community. As we move forward, again, here I'm looking at, here's the prices off of the New York Mercantile Exchange, which is what the PUC, the Public Utility Commission, will base their gas prices on, or the money's coming back. And you can see right now we're down to about $2.07. The high price a couple years ago was at over $4.50. Record takes us back to about $10 for the same amount of gas. But what we've seen, gas has gone down in price. Why is it going down? There's a lot more gas available today. Right? Here's the 5-year range. You can see the price average for 2011. In 2012, we're dropping down even lower. We'll keep going. The issue of that is that we will see less money at the local level for use. It's going to take some very important decision making for the elected officials, both statewide and at the municipal level, on what monies they get and how they're going to make that investment wisely. Under Act 13, there's 13 different areas in which you can utilize the money. Everything from roads and bridges to GIS systems. Counties will have it for judicial and legal services, capital reserve funds. The first checks will come out in December of this year, and municipalities will have to report that money use back to the PUC. The huge impacts are the local zoning issues. What we've had now under Act 13, the Act preempts all local zoning issues with the Municipal Planning Code not adopted in compliance with Municipal Planning Code or Floodplain Management Act, or in direct conflict with Act 13. Well, that sounds like a pretty easy thing to deal with. It it takes away the zoning issues. But I would submit that if you're our municipal governments, the very basis that you're in business is because of local land use decisions. Whether you have zoning or don't have zoning is a local decision. The local impacts, again, some very broad terms. What does Act 13 mean when they talk about agricultural districts, industrial districts, and residential? You and I, if we have zoning, may think we know what they mean. But I'm willing to bet that if you go and look at all your zoning ordinances across not just Cumberland and Dauphin and Perry County, but across all 66 counties that we're dealing with in Pennsylvania, not counting Philadelphia, we will find a different interpretation of agricultural, zoning, and residential. We will be dealing with not only those aspects, but overlay districts. And I tried to look up a little bit over the last few weeks of what is an agricultural district. I think I know what it means, but I'm sure the PUC has a different interpretation of it completely. And we know that because we met with the PUC and asked them, what do you mean? They said, well, we're going to have to hire some people to give us some information on that. They are ramping up. They are trying to determine what all the zoning ordinances mean. And some cases, they'll probably make the right decision on it.